Hey guys, what's up? And welcome to what I want to call a new series, but it kind of depends on how things work out. This is a countdown series that I kind of wanted to do because, well, let's just say while playing video games and while not playing video games, I seem to come up with a lot of ideas. And so I wanted to use this as a way to creatively put those ideas out there to maybe hopefully inspire someone to maybe put these ideas into a game. And so today, for the first episode of what I'm calling the Perfect 10, we're going to count down 10 countries that we want our next operators in Rainbow Six Siege to come from. Now, I left off of this list, obviously, Hong Kong and Poland, because in season 3 we're going to be getting some Hong Kong and Polish operators, and probably in season 4 we'll get our second Polish operator and two others. With that being said, here are 10 uh, operators or countries we want our operators to be from. So, number 10, Korea. Now, I get it. There's two separate Koreas. There's North Korea and there's South Korea. And honestly, I could have done them as two separate entries, but I really felt like that would kind of be wasting a spot that was deserving of another country. And so I went ahead and I lumped them together and gave them the number 10 spot. So I think Korean operators could be really cool considering the tension between North and South Korea. I could see a lot of cool and unique abilities or gadgets coming from those operators. Maybe a lot of counterintelligence, a lot like how Valkyrie in game has her own cameras she can set up, or perhaps even a drone for the defenders who can follow around attackers and ping them. So, if there's an enemy around the corner, they can say, hey, there's one guy here, and then next thing you know, a friendly can peek them. Perhaps even, maybe something like Frost's welcome mats, maybe, to perhaps act as a pressure plate for a motion sensor. I'm going to do a separate video for, ideas for gadgets, but I kind of just want to keep this, just kind of about the countries themselves. And so, looping back to, Korea and its kind of tension and history, Korea also was, part of the Korean War, obviously, and we know the history there. And so I think there could be a lot of cool kind of background and in-depth stories that you could kind of tell, a lot like how, in the most recent Season 3 update, we learn about Ella, whose grandfather served in World War II, and then her father served in the same unit that she's now a part of. There's a lot of different things you could do with Korean operators, and so I think that would be really cool. But and the reason why Korean operators went to number 10 instead of being up at 5, 6, 4, 3 is because, well, we've kind of gotten a lot of operators from Asia recently. I mean, not too long ago we got Habana and Echo from Japan, and then recently we got who was it? Mira and Jackal was from Spain, so they don't even count. But now this season, season 3, we're getting Hong Kong, which is over there as well. And so that's why I put Korea at number 10, because continuing kind of a lot of the Asian influence would kind of be unfair to other parts of the world. So let's move on to another country kind of over in the Asian continent. Number 9, India. I think India would be really cool as well. Now, most of India is very rough terrain, jungle and hills and, a lot of closely dense spaces. But I think you could do something cool that kind of loops to that or alludes to that, I should say. You could do something that has to do with, repelling or, stopping repels or whatever it might be. And on top of that, India, in terms of history, kind of has a rich history of, being a nation divided, and then the British later come in and colonize and take them over, make them a colony, and then India gets its independence from Britain. And so you could do something cool with like Indian operators that have a little bit of British influence to them, maybe in the way they dress, maybe in their tactics or their gadgets or weapons. You could in theory bring maybe Indian operators with British weapons but special Indian unique abilities. That could be something very interesting and cool we could see, but I don't really want to see more trappers because I feel like we have enough trappers on defense, so try to avoid that. Number 8 is Portuguese operators. That's right, Portuguese operators. So we very, very recently, as in last season, got Spanish operators in Jackal and Mira. I would really, really like to have some Portuguese operators come in soon. Partially because Portugal is a very small country with a lot of very close quarters condensedness to it. And so I think you could do a lot of things that would be good for close quarters combat. And if you do that with these Portuguese operators, it would make playing on certain maps like Plain and Favela potentially really benefit them as close quarter operators. On top of that, Portugal has had a huge history when it comes to colonizing and releasing colonies and being a part of influence across the world. And while, yes, we have Brazilian operators in the game, which in theory would speak Portuguese, I want operators from legitimately Portugal. We can't just say, one country speaking one language is it for every country. So Portugal, I think, would be a cool kind of fit. And on top of that, I think Portugal is one of those countries that not a lot of video games have really showcased in their games. And so what better opportunity for Portugal to get a showcase than, well, right here in Rainbow Six Siege. That brings me to number 7, and speaking of countries who don't really get showcased in games, well, this country does quite a bit, but let's forget that. Number 7, Mexico, and some Mexican operators. Now, this is such an easy idea. I mean, you're literally talking about a country that is a mess altogether. I mean, you got the drug problems, the whole border dispute with North America, a history of, the Mexican-American War and having to deal with all of that. Having to cede Texas and Arizona and New Mexico to the U.S. The Spanish-American War that happened a long time ago could, in theory, be argued as well. And so I think Mexican operators would be really cool, especially considering you could do gadgets and other things that would kind of throw back to, dealing with drug lords and drugs getting smuggled, across both borders. So it could be really kind of fun and interesting. That brings me to number 6, the Italian operators. Now, funny enough, there was a point in Siege when Phoenix thought the German operators were Italian, just because the German flag had like an eagle on it, and he just kind of assumed that was Italian, which is kind of weird, or maybe he just had a blonde moment, who knows. But it gave me the idea of putting Italian operators into Rainbow Six Siege, because Italy is kind of weird and interesting, because what you have is a country that in its major cities is very, very condensed, like Rome and whatnot. And then most of Italy is rolling countryside hills, which is very beautiful. And so it would be interesting to see what Ubisoft would do for Italian operators. And so with that being said, I think there could be argument made for a second sniper to come into Siege, although a second sniper would kind of cause Glaz to become a little less relevant. but few people play Glass now as it is, so I mean, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea. Number 5, the Swedish operators. Now, again, a lot like Portugal, I feel like Sweden has not had a lot of love in video games. And there's nothing I would love more than to give Sweden that love and attention, because Sweden is great. And who wouldn't want to see Swedish operators come into Rainbow Six Siege? There's something that could be said about doing Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish operators because, well, kind of obviously they're all part of what is known as Scandinavia, those 3 countries. But I wanted to showcase Sweden more than anything because Sweden has a way of coming up with interesting and unique things. And if Ubisoft really does look to actual gadgets that are actually, out there, then I feel like Sweden would have something cool and innovative to bring in, a lot like how, Jackal has his hunter's mark, or a lot like how Ying will have her Candelas, which is basically the cluster charge of Fuse but flashbangs. Innovation is really cool to see in the game, and I feel like Sweden would be one of those countries that would bring a lot of innovation and different ideas to Rainbow Six Siege. And also, Sweden, unlike a lot of these other countries, doesn't have a lot of history in wars. In World War II, they were neutral. In World War I think they were also neutral. A lot of Sweden's history is basically just, Viking, Scandinavian history. And what you end up having is a country that's not historically, super exciting, such as, service and wars and whatnot. But you do have a country that is pretty well known for innovation, and especially when it comes to the government. So anyway, enough about me loving Sweden. It's time for number 4, the Swiss. Don't get them confused. The Swedes and the Swiss are 2 different people. The Swedes are very far north with Norway and Denmark, and the Swiss are trapped, unfortunately, between Italy and Germany. But I think that makes a very valid reason as to why the Swiss could be another great addition to Siege. Now, understandably, I keep saying innovation is the best thing we can bring to Siege. And I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who would have more innovation really than the Swiss. And that's because you're talking about a country who stayed neutral in everything but was always surrounded by enemies. I mean, in the Second World War, Switzerland stayed neutral, and they were squashed between Germany and Italy, and they were surrounded. They did a lot of fortifying, a lot of bunker building, a lot of barbed wire, a lot of everything. They trained hard, and even in Hearts of Iron 4, their armies in Hearts of Iron 4 are super hard to beat. And I feel like that could carry into Siege. You could have operators that are super defendable, really good defenders, and even attackers are really good at, maybe taking punishment or being at the front and receiving damage. And so I could see the Swiss coming up with some sort of maybe juggernaut-like gadget for attackers that wouldn't be super OP, but would also be, pretty good when attacking. But, this is one of those things where I put them at number 4 because I think they'd be most innovative. Not so much because, they are the 4th best of these top 10. So that takes me to number 3. And speaking of countries that I really want to see get operators in the game, number 3, Irish operators. Oh my God. Could you imagine Irish operators in the game? Now, mind you, I get it. Irish operators, in theory, would be a part of British operators because United Kingdom. I get that. However, I feel like Ireland, A, never gets any showcase, and B, as small of a country as they are, I feel like they would be the type of operators that would be ready, willing, and able to handle most fights. And as we all know, the stereotypes and whatnot that has gone around, that they like to fight. And what better way to really show that in Siege than to maybe do something interesting with some sort of maybe close quarter combat, like, I don't know, some sort of special brass knuckles or something. You know, something cool and interesting. This is something that I feel like could be really good, or could be one of those things that people will just hate and never play. And so Irish operators are a toss-up, but I think it'd be really cool to see Irish operators. Which brings me to number 2. Greek operators. That's right, I said it. I want to go to Greece. Problem? Anyway, originally this spot was going to Bulgaria. Don't ask me why. I needed an extra space, and Bulgaria was going to go at 10, and everybody else was going to get moved up. But then I thought of Greece, and I thought of Greek operators, and I thought maybe, just maybe, something cool could come from the Greeks. You know, they again have a history, a lot of ancient warfare, and a lot of other things as well, such as, you know, the whole history with the Persians, the Spartans. You have the Second World War, where they were, you know, attacked there. You have the original First World War as well. I don't know if they were a part of the First World War, but there was a lot of action relatively near them with the Ottoman Empire and Britain at Gallipoli and whatnot. And so I feel like Greece is one of those countries that has been secretly innovative, but we don't know about it. And so I think it'd be cool to see what Greece may have to offer in Rainbow Six Siege. Which leads me to my number 1 pick, and the one country I want operators from more than any country in the world. That's from Australia. G'day, mate. G'day. So, why Australia? Well, it's simple. Why not Australia? I mean, they literally tell you everything in Australia will kill you. Literally. So operators should be very deadly. Imagine, we all hate Caviera on defense. She's good at sneaking around, putting her gun in your butt, and pulling triggers. So what better way than to potentially get a Caviera-type character on attack, but from Australia? And on top of that, Australia, I feel like, being home to so many deadly creatures, could prove to, you know, have many different ideas for, again, as much as I hate trapper defenders and think we need to mix it up because every defender seems to be a trapper, I really think that you could come up with a lot of cool trapping ideas. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. That is my 10 ideas for 10 countries that we want our operators to be from in the next update, Season 4 on, obviously, because we already know what we're getting in Season 3. So thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all, excuse me for that burp, in the next episode. Goodbye, guys.